So Dennis was making the point that within his parents' marriage, his father got Playboy, his mother knew about it, and she didn't care about it. So was it a problem? And I think both you and I would agree that degrading sex to the purely visual and taking it outside the confines of marriage is a wrong. Now, Dennis, because he was saying it's happening within the confines of a consensual relationship, it's less of a wrong than other wrongs. And I agree there are gradations of wrong, obviously. That situation, which I agree is wrong, is, I think, less wrong than a situation in which the husband, without the knowledge of his wife and without the consent of his wife, is doing that sort of thing. Both can be wrong. One can be more wrong than the other thing. But the question is whether there's any sort of objective moral standard as to where you draw that line, where your wife doesn't feel used, but lust is operative, for example.
Yeah, and I would say that like a woman or a man feeling used in the sexual act is often a phenomenological response to an objective reality, namely being reduced to one's sexual value. But I would also say that it's not necessary to experience being used for lust to have occurred. It's possible, of course, that two people can seek to objectify each other. Neither feels used, but they're wrong not to feel used. And at this point, I mean, I think it is important, and I agree with you, that there is a spectrum. Some things are worse than other things. But what I want to do is maybe turn 180 degrees in the other direction, rather than asking, well, is this worse than this? Because I think that sometimes we look to things that are very perverse to justify what is, relatively speaking, a smaller perversity, to justify our own weakness. But maybe the question ought to be, how do I love my wife in the way that she deserves? Or what kind of man could I become if I stopped justifying my cowardice and lust? So I suppose what I would say is our blessed Lord in the scriptures is calling us to be more righteous than the Pharisees, who he calls whitewashed tombs. And so I want to turn 180 degrees in the other direction, away from, well, what's worse than what, towards how do I best love my wife? What kind of man could I be if I stopped justifying my cowardice and weakness? I think anyone who's lived longer than 5 minutes realizes that when we spend time with people who are worse than us, we tend to see their vices and our virtues. But when we spend time with people better than us, we tend to see their virtues and our vices. And I think that's more conducive to growing in the interior life. So this gets back to what I shared with Dennis about the fallacy of the beard. I might not know when a thing becomes that thing, but it doesn't mean I can't say what that thing is. And so I don't know sometimes when I've committed the sin of greed or anger or sloth, but I do know those things are possible. And I think as one grows in moral maturity, one seeks not only to have one's actions rightly ordered, but one seeks for his desires to line up with objective reality.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. Before you go, do us a favor, leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the video, like, and subscribe.